Haslam reacting to the deadly shootings last hour on Fox and Friends, weighing in on the gun-free zones on military bases.
I think what I would always do in a situation is before you ask somebody to end something, you need to understand why they had it in place before. So the military has a place, has a protocol in place about carrying weapons on these facilities. It's worked up through the chain of command, and I think we'll all begin by saying, help us understand on a day when that doesn't seem to make much sense, help us understand why that policy is in place.
Joining us now to talk more about policy, Mike Baker is with us right now. Mike is former CIA covert operations officer. He's president of Diligence. Mike, thank you for joining us. The governor not yet ready to change the policy of guns on these bases, but these servicemen and women had no way to defend themselves. What's your take on this policy of having our men and women unarmed?
Right. Well, I mean, it goes back to 92, I believe. So it's been in place for some time. But the reality is the world's different, right? We're facing different threats at this time. We know that ISIS has been calling for both committed believers and anybody who, is willing to latch on to their ideals to go out and attack U.S. military and law enforcement. So, I think it's the right time to reassess that policy and look to make that change. But at the same time, we don't want to, it's like putting a lipstick on a pig or a Band-Aid on a sucking chest wound. We don't want to lose sight of the reason why we're seeing more and more of these attacks, not just here in the U.S., but around the world. It's because ISIS has a physical manifestation of a caliphate. That's what's driving their ability to influence people around the world. Again, whether a committed believer or just a nut job, to latch on to this. Until we deal with that problem, until we take their turf away, we're going to be having these unfortunate, sad, tragic conversations for a long time.
Gary Smith.
Mike, quick question. From your CIA background, I think one of the things that just from a layman's perspective, we need to do is embed ourselves with intelligence within ISIS. Do you have any idea what we're trying to do to get that intelligence, to embed assets in there and work from the inside rather than the outside?
Sure. Well, and that's an ideal world, right? That's the holy grail, is to get human sources inside of a terrorist network. The unfortunate reality is it's not like 24 or a beach book or a big, feature film. It's one of the most difficult things you can possibly try. Now, we've been working on it for a very long time. Have we had some success? Well, sure. Have our liaison partners, whether it's the Saudis, Jordanians, whomever, have they had success? Yes. But it's something you're constantly working on. But it is a very, very heavy lift in the intel world. When you're talking about developing and recruiting a source, this is as tough as it gets.
We want to show a picture here, a live picture of Times Square, New York City. We are seeing increased police presence, obviously, around certainly the U.S. Armed Forces recruiting station in Times Square. The level of protection is increased. How do you see things changing, Mike, on the heels of what has just transpired?
Well, I would hope, going back to your first point, I would hope that we would have a serious discussion and reassessment of the policy of whether our service personnel can carry weapons on their facilities. But at the end of the day, look, there's a balance. And every time there's an incident like this, we talk about that balance between privacy and civil liberties and security. And would we have, if we had had the complete lockdown and complete monitoring of all social media, of all citizens, would we have still caught this individual, Abdulaziz, prior to this Chattanooga shooting? My gut feeling is probably not. We're not going to get to that point. We're not going to get to the point where we minimize the risk down to zero. It's not going to happen. So we have to deal with the problem at the root, right?
Yeah.
If we keep dealing with it the way we are, being reactive, we're just going to have more and more of these incidents. As long as they've got turf over there and they've got something they can call their own, a state, we got this problem.
Dagan.
Hey, Mike, it's Dagan.
Yeah. Hey, Dagan.
Where do you fall in making more of an effort to shut down ISIS activity on Twitter and other social media sites? Because there is that divide of do you want to crack down on it even more than is already happening, or do you gather valuable intelligence from those conversations?
Yeah, it's a very important point. It's a double-edged sword. You want to be careful about saying, well, look, because we do have the ability. Could we just put a blanket on it, shut it down? Yeah, and yes, of course we could. But what do you lose? You lose the potential for operational leads and inquiries, and those investigations can be extremely important. Look, the FBI is carrying open investigations throughout every state of this nation, possibly with the exception of Alaska, maybe.
Yeah.
But so that's a very important source of potential intelligence. But it's incredibly frustrating to the general public when they look and say, wait a minute, there was a social media. How could we not have caught this person? You know, so we're not going to live in that world. We don't want to be that country that completely locks everything down. But we've got to find a better point on the spectrum.
And I just want to quickly point out, because I was we're hard on Twitter, but then, and not Google and YouTube, but it was a few days before that attack on the Tunisian beach. There was a video of 3 atrocities that was on YouTube.
Right. And then they shut it down.
By ISIS, but at the same time, Google executives were claiming that they were not an avenue for this kind of propaganda, but it was up there nonetheless.
Right. So real quick, Mike, what is the responsibility of a Twitter and a Facebook and a YouTube?
Well, this is something we should talk about in a 1-hour special. The cooperation between the private and the public sector is something that we need to focus on. Whether we're talking about economic espionage or terrorism cooperation, that's something that, look, for people, the executives at Twitter or Google to say, I don't know, it's not our job. Nobody's asking them to troll through their system and proactively find this. But if they do spot something, if they see something that appears to be terrorist related or sympathetic, then, good God, it's not a big leap to say you've got a moral responsibility to report that.
Exactly.
We're having a hard time getting them to that position.
Mike, thank you very much for your weighing in. We will see you soon, Mike. Mike Baker there.
Take care.